Hello, everyone. Hope you're having a good Wednesday evening. 7 o'clock here Central Time. It is April 25th, 2023. We had the fifth day of the jury trial, the murder trial of Dan Triplett, and it came to an end today. There's one more day as far as court proceedings is concerned, but we'll talk about that here in a little bit. Appreciate everyone stopping by and checking it out here. It was 5 total days when you go back to last week on Monday, starting with jury selection. Jury deliberations was today. Jury selection started on Monday, took 1 full day. Testimony on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. And that was enough for all the testimony to be in this case. And of course, today, Tuesday, with the verdict in the trial. There's going to be some things. I have some notes that have come up over the last couple of days. Some great questions by you folks out there. So, and then I'll go into some of the closing arguments today. Got a few pages of those. A lot of it was kind of rehashing some stuff from last week, but there was some other stuff that's worth noting. So I won't go through the entire closing arguments for both sides, just because if you've been following this, we definitely know the events in the past, but there are some things I want to highlight from today's closing arguments. All started this morning at 9 o'clock. It was a jam-packed courthouse. All the Oklahoma City media was here today, so the hallways was full of people. The courtroom was full of people the entire day. There were more family members for both sides in the courtroom today. There's a little bit more people from the public as well. There were OSBI agents in the courtroom watching this go on. There was a few police officers in the courthouse as well. So this was the final day. They all wanted to hear the closing arguments, and the jurors were given their instructions. That was the first thing that happened this morning. Judge Corley set them down and gave them the jury instructions, and it was 17 minutes of Judge Corley reading jury instructions. But the attorneys, both sides of the attorneys, met on Friday to go over jury selection, over jury instructions of what can be in and not in there. So that took place. There were some things that have come up in here. One thing is the jurors. They did a fantastic job. 12 jurors. 4 white females, 1 black male, and 7 white males were the 12. There was 2 alternate jurors, and felt sorry for those 2 alternate jurors. They had to sit there the entire time. And then those 2 alternate jurors, when everything was done this morning, they had to go to a fairly small room by themselves while the other 12 jurors went upstairs to deliberate the case. And so they were kind of held by their own, because there have been times when someone goes upstairs and gets sick and can't complete it or something like that. So that's why Judge Corley kept the alternative jurors until the very end. But they have a tough job, and I've been through a lot of these trials, and in the public, and I'm guilty of it too. It's easy to say they're guilty, they're not guilty, whether you hear the evidence or not. But there was a lot of evidence in this case, a lot of camera stuff against Dan Triplett. But when those 12 jurors, when you're the one that has to send somebody off to the jail for the rest of their life, or even 5 years or 10 years, it's still a tough deal. And Ronald Wallace, Dan Triplett's attorney, did a pretty good job of that in his closing arguments, just kind of put that thought into their head. But we'll talk about that a little bit later on. So they have a tough job. It's not just he's guilty, move on. The death penalty, that question has come up a few times. There's like 8 criteria that meets the death penalty, and the state prosecutors did not go there. There's out of the 8 qualifiers for the death penalty, I thought maybe 3 of them maybe sit in this situation. But remember, if there's a death penalty case, you have the trial here, then you have all the appeals, then it's a process, and that could be a 10-year process. So in reality, I know some people really wanted it. The Mack family didn't seem upset by that. They got what they want, but Of course, if you're just tuning in, and if you haven't known, Dan Triplett was found guilty today of first-degree murder and also desecration of a body. The jurors have requested that Dan Triplett be serve his term in prison without the life of parole, which that was one option they had. That's the one they went with. And then 7 years, which is the max for count 2, desecration of a body, and an $8,000 fine. That's what the jury recommended sentencing to. Judge Corley will have Dan Triplett back in the courtroom on June 16th at 9 a.m. for the formal sentencing. So at that June 16th formal sentencing, Dan Triplett will have a chance to talk one final time. He'll be able to have family members talk one final time before. Now, they don't have to, but they do have that option before Judge Corley hands down the sentence. The other options that the jurors could have gone with was life with possibility of parole and a life sentence in Oklahoma. So if you get a life sentence in Oklahoma, that is a minimum 45-year deal, and that's what they call an 85% crime. So you have to serve 85% of that 45 years. And if the jurors gave Dan Triplett life with possibility of parole, he would have to serve 38 years and 3 months. Obviously, when this took place in September 2021, Dan Triplett was 67 at the time. So he's 68, maybe 69, depending on when his birthday is. I forgot to write that down. But he's 68, 69 years old. So, you can look at it a lot of different ways. So I think the punishment was, either punishment was going to be a life sentence, but I think the jurors sent that without parole to send an even stronger message with that. So, all right. So that was the death penalty. And if you guys have questions, I see them coming in. Just if you do have a question, put a Q or question in front of that, and I'll come back to those here in a little bit. Another thing that came up in this case was that the case that many thought that Dan Triplett, some thought Dan Triplett could not get a fair trial in Logan County. And it proved that he could get a fair trial in Logan County. It's not up to the judge, all of it, although it is. The defense, like Dan Triplett's attorneys, would have to make that motion to the judge for that to be moved to another county, to be considered to move to another county. And that motion by Dan Triplett's attorney was never made, so that never came. In fact, a source told me, and I don't know, a source told me that the Triplett, Ron Wallace, the Triplett attorney, wanted the case to be held in Logan County because Dan Triplett's from here and how he is well respected, former city council member and former businessman. He thought he would get a fair trial here. So my source told me that the Triplett attorneys did not want to move out of county. So that was another one that came up a little bit. I've gotten so many messages, and I appreciate all the kind messages you guys have been sending me for these updates. Glad to do it. Just, again, a reminder, I know you guys would love to be there, can't be there. And so I try to give as much details as you want. But I had one person reach out to me and confirmed that Brent Mack was left-handed. They went to grade school with them, and there weren't very many left-handers in their class, but Brent Mack was left-handed. And, of course, if you remember, Dan Triplett said in the hole that Brent Mack pulled the gun out with his left hand out of his left pocket. So that's just the type of information I've been getting over the last week or so. So I appreciate all the great messages out there. Here in a little bit, I did have someone else ask me if I saw the video, which I did in court. Can you tell the difference between a jump or a fall in there? And I think I could tell, but I will reserve those comments until we get to that spot in the arguments today. Again, I won't go through everything. I got another 8-10 pages of closing arguments, but a lot of it was kind of repeated, and I will kind of go through those here in just a little bit. Question, G.F. Guthrie. Thank you, G.F. Guthrie. How long did they deliberate for? Good question. So Judge Corley excused the jurors at 11:39 this morning up to the jurors box, or in the jurors room on the 3rd floor. and they were served lunch. They put in a lunch order, and they knocked on the door at 1:52. And so they were up there for 2 hours and 13 minutes. That includes eating lunch. Now, obviously, I've served it on trial many, many years ago in Logan County. And you get up there, you talk, you deliberate. You probably take an early poll of what everyone thought was guilty or not guilty. And then you have a discussion after that. Then you have lunch, and you eat your lunch. Pizza, by the way, if you're counting at home. And then you have one final vote. There was one question. The jurors did come down with one question for Judge Corley, something to do with about an autopsy report. And Judge Corley said they had all the evidence, which they did upstairs. The jurors were given a television so they can watch the video. And I do have a still photo of that video here in a second that I'll share with you. It's not the greatest photo, but I can kind of give you an idea what that photo looked like. But in total, 2 hours and 13 minutes was the jury is how long they took. I thought, when a lot of people asked me, how long did you think they would be out? And I was telling everybody, I thought after hearing anything, it was going to be 2 hours or less. And if it's 2 hours or less, that is never a good sign if you're a defendant. In most cases, sometimes it's really good for them, but most of the time, especially in cases like this, it is not good at all. Thank you for that question. Okay, so the jurors' jury instructions were done at 9:23. J.R. Kalka, the assistant district attorney for Logan County, the state, if you will, gave his closing argument. That started at 9:24. He ended at 10:24. And I got to tell you, J.R. did a tremendous job in those 5 days. He was, what I say, TV good. You see TV attorneys and going back and forth and going. He was TV good. I thought he had a tremendous. I thought he did a tremendous job for the district attorney's office, for the Brent Mack family, and for the community. He was big time. And there were a few times that he had to attorney on his feet, if you will, because when Dan Triplett went on the stand, there was a whole new side of the story that nobody had heard before. And so he had to kind of quickly go through a lot of stuff that Dan Triplett was throwing out there. I thought he did a great job. Ron Wallace, the Triplett attorney, gave his closing arguments, and then the state had a rebuttal, so they had to go first, and then the defense gets to go second, and then the state, because they have the burden of the proof, they get to have one final say in a rebuttal. And I thought he did a great job of rebutting some of the things that Ron Wallace had said. So big credit to J.R. Kalka. I would assume that was his first murder case that he's tried before. Laura Austin Thomas, the district attorney, was there the entire time next to him, but it was all J.R. For those 5 days. So I thought he did a tremendous job. Okay, so JR's talking his opening things. He said presumption of innocence, not presumption of honesty. Dan Triplett lied many, many times throughout this entire investigation. He lied to police. He first started the lie that day. Remember, he buried the body, and then the property owners, the two siblings, come in and start talking to Triplett. And Dan Triplett at the time said that his help did not show up. So he immediately started lying right then, lied to several police officers, OSBI agents, and he admitted that. We'll talk about that here in a second. Dan Triplett said the other day that he wanted to protect his reputation. And I'm reading my notes here, so if I'm stammering, I apologize. JR said he shot him in the back, whether it was self-defense or what they said was behind him. It's still malice. And JR simply says several times, you can't trust Dan Triplett because he's been lying. And then he gets on the stand last Thursday, and now all of a sudden he's telling the truth. So JR continued to say, we don't know what's true. We don't know what's not true. The waters are muddy. And then JR went through a list of 15 reasons why you can't believe Dan Triplett and his story. So Dan Triplett says it was self-defense. He went down the hole. They had this altercation in the hole. But JR gave 15 reasons why. And I won't go through all of them, but Dan Triplett said he fired Brent Mack because he wanted to leave the job site. And JR said, well, it was almost the end of the day. They're almost done. So why would he want to come back the next day? He said there was more work to be done, and he was working when Brent Mack went into the hole. He said Brent Mack threatened him so he would not be homeless. And JR again said $11 an hour job. It was under the table. He's getting paid cash. Why would, he's going to go to Texas. Why that? He said, Dan Triplett says Brent Mack quick draw the gun out of his pocket. And it was a snub-nosed gun. This is a photo here. This is not the exact photo, but that's what a snub-nosed gun looks like. That's just a photo off the internet. That is not by any means a evidence photo there. And I forgot my disclaimer. If you're a juror, you can watch this all you want now. So that's no disclaimers here tonight. But anyway, he said that Brent Mack quickly drew the gun out of his pocket with his work gloves on, and JR said those aren't those. It was not designed for quick draw. It's hard, and JR did a good job of if you have gloves on, it's hard to get your phone out. If you have big gloves, because he was wearing jeans, it's hard to get your hand in your jeans, much less a hand with a glove into your jeans. Physically, it makes no sense. And he mentioned the cell phone. He mentioned Brent Mack was a big guy. He was 6'4", so obviously he had big gloves, big hands, and it's hard to get a finger into this little spot here on the trigger on such a small gun. And JR said all that and said because, quote, it didn't happen. The severance package that came up. He said, $11 is this part of the truth face? Was this part of the lie? Was there really a severance package? And he went into the financial part of it. He said if he gave him $1,000, it'd be 2.5 weeks of wages. The one part that JR said that on number 8, he said number 8, there were 4 shots fired. He said, living in the county, someone is coming. That, there's shots fired all the time in the county because a lot of people live in the county so they can shoot their gun. But he said people would probably hear that and come to the site, which that could be true. But, remember the property owners live 15 minutes away. The construction company that got the video that I'll have a still shot of here in a second was 600 feet away. So maybe they could have heard that, but that's one time I went, maybe not on that one. That's the only little flaw I can find in that one. JR says Dan Triplett commit the burial part of it. Didn't pause to consider to call anyone. And he said Dan Triplett was just fortunate enough to have a hole already ready to go, and that Brent Mack was covered within 10 minutes. He said extreme care and caution on the leveling the tank, and but tosses the weapon on the trailer bed, and Dan Triplett said he just assumed it bounced off the county road. Another reason, dropped the belonging on the sidewalk. Remember the duffel bag? He went to go check his lights and saw the bag and just threw it off to the side. Why was the cell phone not in the bag for anyone to find? Dan Triplett's phone was deleted of calls and messages that he did. So obviously the phone was not put in there because in the duffel bag, because someone might have found that phone. And if someone found Brent Mack's phone, all the call logs and all the information is there. So at the end of this, there is no Brent Mack phone and there is no gun matching that bullet in there. And many people say those disappeared. Did they go into a river? Did they go underground? Where did they go? We may never find out. He went back to the 65-minute audio interview that Mark Bruning, Agent Woodward, and Dan Triplett had back on October 12th. And he said Mark Bruning gave him every opportunity to come forward on finding the body. Mark Bruning gave him 2 chances on self-defense, and Dan Triplett wouldn't go with that. And JR said, one of the quotes that Dan Triplett said in the interview was, quote, "You're going to have to go find him," because they were just trying to get Dan Triplett say, where is he at? We don't, you're not going to go to jail, all this stuff. Where is he at? And Dan Triplett said, you're going to have to find him. And a lot of times, JR said, cross it off this list because it's not true. It's not reasonable about Dan Triplett. That's a good point. Beverly Thompson asking what was the motive. We'll get to that part here in just a second. I didn't realize this until today in court, but we will talk about what happened in court as far as the motive and what some of the evidence might say about a motive. But there was one thing that I learned that's coming up here in just a few moments here. JR said that Dan Triplett went to great lengths to cover it up. Did a great job of covering up the gun. Did a great job of covering up the phone. But he did not do a good job of hiding the body. With that goes back to great police work. They had that interview on October 12th. They don't believe Dan Triplett. A search warrant for documents for Dan Triplett's property. They go into the truck, into two different trucks, and there's two different receipts, one for a half payment, one for a full payment, and they find the location of that job site in Mulhall, and they go there. They survey the area. They see a construction company. Hopefully they have a camera system, and they do. They had an 8-camera system. Camera number 4 picked up on it. And I will show you this photo here now. And this is, remember, there's no cameras allowed in the courtroom, so I had to take this I had to walk outside, take a picture of the TV monitor that was used, and I will go ahead and show you the photo here just to kind of show. So there's a lot of black markings on the bottom of this video. Those are the jurors, and I had to hide them out. And also, I'm going to make this a little bit larger so it kind of fit on your screen. And why is it not fitting on the screen? Why is it not enlarging? Oh, did I click the wrong one? Okay, there we go. Apologize for that. So here, so there's the markings that other jurors I had to crop out. I had to take this outside, and so there's a blind. There's a mini blind that you have to shoot through, and it's very hard to shoot through to get even this type of picture. But there's this little white glaze here. That's the light from the hallway. So obviously they don't have that on the TV. This is the OSBI video that they enhance. So if you look, this is at the construction site. This is for the driveway of the construction company here. Back here is the actual site. There you see Dan Triplett's truck, the trailer, and there's the dirt over here and in the hole, all in this area. Now, this picture down here is more of enhanced. They enhanced, remember I told you on Thursday, OSBI Forensics enhanced this photo. And this is, you can see it on the video. We talked about, again, this is a horrible picture, but this is what it looked like to jurors. And so they're watching this, and the backhoe's right here. The hole is over here. Brent Mack is over here on the far side of this hole. You see Dan Triplett get off the backhoe. You see him get off the backhoe. Then you see him walk over here to his truck for a few seconds. And then Dan Triplett walks around here to the backside of Brent Mack. And that's when Brent Mack went into the hole, or is what Dan Triplett would want the jurors to believe, that he jumped in the hole. We'll talk about the altercation, the said to be altercation in the hole there. So Dan Triplett gets off a backhoe. Oh, and coming up here in a second. So this is the hole over here. There's a pile of dirt. There's a pile of dirt right over here. Keep that in mind. I will come back to that pile of dirt here in just a second. Okay, so I'll bring this photo up here one more time. I'm just kind of going in order of this. So JR gets to the motive part. I thought JR did a very good job of describing this. I did not know this. Not great with my attorney, my court, all that good stuff. But he said, why did this happen? What's the motive in this case? And JR told the jurors that a motive is not hold on. Let me make sure I get this right. Maybe that came a little bit later, but I'm going to go ahead and say it thing. The motive does not matter in finding intent. It's two different things. Intent is one thing, motive is another, in that one of the elements that the prosecution had to do show, one of those was not motive. So you can go through the entire case without showing any motives. That's not an element to finding guilt. Did not know that, but they do not have to find guilt. Now, they dropped a few items of note. The text message, the nude photos between Dan Triplett and Trini Salazar. That came up a few times. Brent Mack asked Dan Triplett about affairs. And so you put all that together. That's probably where the motive was. But JR said he can't stand here and tell you 100%. It would be disingenuous if I came in here and told you that it's this, or this, when I don't for 100% sure know that's the case. There are call logs. If they had Brent Mack's phone, maybe they have more information there. But J.R. Coughlin said, I'm going to be, would not be fair to say that for sure. So motive or no motive, it's not an element to find guilt in this case. And that was, a couple days into the process. I was like, where's the motive? Where's the motive? Didn't have to have a motive. You have to find intent. But there was messages of marital affairs. And then JR talked about Brent Mack's family would not rest or sleep until they had closure on this. Dan Triplett did not account for video cameras. JR said, we have done our part. Today is the day for justice. The justice for the community, family, and for Brent Mack. And JR did all that in 1 hour, from 9:24 to 10:24. Then there was a 15-minute break in the courtroom. And then it was the defense closing time. Ronald Wallace did that. He started at 10:43, and he went all the way until 11:23. So he spoke for 40 minutes. He thanked the jury. He talked about Dan Triplett's life, how he was a council member, and he said he started going into no one was in the hole. Remember Dan Triplett's story on the stand, because it's changed a few times, but his story on the stand on Thursday was Brent Mack. The complete septic tank hole was 6 feet down. Now, 2 feet down was where the lateral lines was. So there's the ground level, 2 foot down for the lateral lines, and then another 4 feet down to the bottom of the hole. Now, J.R. Coughlin said it was more than 6 feet, but they said it was closer at 6 feet, and that's what I was going with anyway. But that Dan Triplett went down in the hole to help level it, and that's when Brent Mack said he produced a gun with his left hand out of his left pocket. That instantly Dan Triplett was able to reach his hand down. One shot goes off, and then they're fighting up here, hands above their head, and 2 more shots go down, and that Dan Triplett was used his shoulder to hit Brent Mack's shoulder and was able to get the gun and then shot Brent Mack in the back. Either way, Brent Mack was shot in the back. Ronald Wallace said there's no book no playbook when someone pulls a gun on you. No one knows how you will act. He was telling that to the jurors. And you're fighting for your life. This is all circumstantial evidence. And then Ronald Wallace went through all the different, there was, 14, 15 witnesses. I have to look it up. But he went through every single one of those testimonies and went through those. Nothing that we haven't gone over already. But he did say that the prosecutors wanted to believe that you went to his truck to get a weapon, but they couldn't produce a murder weapon. And that's true. JR does a good job of rebutting that here in a second. But When police go to Dan Triplett's house for a gun search warrant, they find the gun in Dan Triplett's truck. But I'll skip a little bit here. But JR said that maybe he replaced the other one. Maybe he had two guns in the truck. He did a good job of putting that in there. I didn't highlight anything else there. Okay, so remember I told you about the pile of dirt. You know what? I'll save that here for when JR gets back up and does his rebuttal. But Ron Wallace, Triplett's attorney, is saying there's a pile of dirt on the south side, and you can't see you can't see the struggle, the alleged struggle in the hole because the dirt was high. You can't see the hole, which, how convenient. JR comes back to that here in a second. How convenient that all the action took place in front of the dirt pile. The entire hole wasn't covered. There wasn't dirt surrounding the entire hole, but it was on the south side, and that's where the alleged all the action took place in the hole. Another thing that Ron Wallace brought up, part of Dan Triplett's last story that he shared, so there's a measuring device. It's a big, long, metal-looking bar. And when you're watching the video, you see a flash. And I thought when I first saw it, that was the gunshot. I thought the flash was the gunshot. Because, again, it was kind of hard to see. You couldn't see, so you're looking really close and you're looking for anything. You see a flash. Well, that was the sun hitting the measuring device. So it gave a little flash. But Ron Wallace was wanting to say that in the video, if he shot him in the back on the ground level, when Brent Mack is on the ladder line into the body, there's not a muzzle flash. And more on the muzzle flash here in a second. Of course, that's the flash from the gun. He said if the state is correct and it's not there, there's no flash. There's no flash of the gun. He went over how the bullet, remember, it went when the bullet, the medical examiner said the bullet went slightly up into Brent Mack's body. They talked about that. Okay. So this is part of the defense kept going, Dan Triplett has 67 years of bliss here in Guthrie. And this is when he started telling jurors to start using common sense. He said common sense over and over and over in the last part of his closing argument. But he said 67 years of bliss, and all of a sudden, Dan Triplett decided to be a cold murderer to someone, is what he said. He started painting the background of Brent Mack getting into an argument with one of Triplett's customers a couple weeks before the Crescent job. So late August, he goes back and starts talking about Brent Mack's drug use, how he threatened people. And Ron Wallace said they need a motive. What a wife. Okay, so this was another part. He said when Dan Triplett was on the stand that he said he had not had an affair. But today, Ron Wallace said his wife knew about the affairs. And so I don't know if that was a slip. I don't think I missed it because I was paying very, very close to that because remember last week I was looking for a motive. Turns out didn't need one, but I was looking for one because everyone's, why would he do that? But today, I don't know if it slipped or he misspoke, but Ron Wallace said his wife knew about the affairs. And I was like, whoa, that came out of nowhere. He continues to talk about the muzzle flash. He was talking about the guy who did the video, who enhanced the video. He's so good that he can't find a muzzle flash either. More on muzzle flash here in a second. He continues to talk about self-defense. You don't know until you're there. Ron Wallace told the jurors, Kevin Woodward, the OSBI agent, that it's not impossible to pull a glove, a gun out of your jeans pocket with a glove. He said it's difficult, but not impossible. So you remind him of that, to pull the gun and to pull the trigger. And then he said, Dan Triplett's attorney said, Dan Triplett lied. There's no question about that. You can't, but he said you can't convict a liar. Self-defense is a lawful legal defense in Oklahoma, he told jurors. He wraps up here by saying a few things. He goes, Brent Mack is gone, but another man's life is at stake. And then he's telling the jurors here, make darn sure you're right. If you go up there and you find Dan Triplett guilty, make sure you are darn sure you are right. You're not going to be able to knock on the prison door. You're not going to be able to knock on his door. You're not going to be able to knock on the judge's door. You're not going to be able to knock on the Brent Mack's family's door. That I made a mistake. I messed up. You're talking about the jurors. It's too late. If you convict him today and you realize that you were wrong, it's too late. So he said, be certain that he did not act in self-defense. Do as you must on count 2, because Dan Triplett admitted that he buried the body, and he said, do as you must. Mr. Triplett acted in self-defense. That was his 40-minute testimony. And then real quickly, the state, J.R. Coughlin, had one last, let's see here. He went from 11:24 to 11:38, so he had 14 minutes of rebuttal. And he said, Dan Triplett is a liar because Dan told us he is a liar. He said there was 2 men on the job site. One is a liar and one is dead. Thought that was pretty strong. He said two people on the job site. One is a liar and one is dead. Muzzle flash. He brings this up. And so they're bringing up muzzle flash from the gun. And I'm like, did I miss something? I don't remember a whole lot of conversation. I remember it come up a little bit during the medical examiner's office about shooting and how far the distance and all that medical stuff there. But I was like, did I miss muzzle flash? And J.R. Coughlin thankfully said that muzzle flash didn't come up hardly at all in testimony. It did a little bit, but not enough to draw on that. And so I don't know if that was Ronald Walsh trying to have a big surprise at the end that, hey, there wasn't no flash. Where if you talk about it, jurors have time to process it. So maybe he was looking for jurors to process it in the juror room and not in the courtroom. So I don't know if that was a method or not. JR also said, every event happens in front of the pile of dirt. How convenient is that? He said, the water's muddy for Dan Triplett. I can't tell what's true and what's not true with him. And this is, again, he goes back. The state does not need a motive. We may never know. It'd be disingenuous if I said there was one. Could not find one, nor could we find the gun. Maybe it replaced the gun. Maybe there was 2 guns in there. Then JR said, live, you don't get to murder people. If you don't just get to murder people, and if you do, you go to jail. And then JR said to the jurors, if you saw it on camera, you know what happened. And so, and then from there, the Judge Corley swears in the bailiff that she will overlook the jurors. Jurors go upstairs at 11:39. There is one question. Judge Corley answers that about an autopsy report. And then they knock on the door at 1:52 to indicate they have a decision, which came 2 hours and 13 minutes of deliberations. So JR talked for an hour 14. Ron Walsh spoke for 40 minutes. When the verdict was read by the court reporter, I was sitting next to both families. I was right in the middle of both families on the front row. And one family member put a clenched fist. There was really no emotions or anything. They were warned not to give any emotions as the verdict was being read. And then to my right was the Triplett family. One daughter was weeping. The wife was weeping. And one daughter was crying pretty hard. So that was the emotions there. Everyone else was just kind of stone-faced on both sides. After that, the state and defense didn't have any other further. Judge Corley said June 16th at 9 a.m. will be the formal sentencing. We talked about that a little bit earlier. And then Dan Triplett stood up and he was handcuffed in front. And then he was escorted back to the jail by the Logan County deputies. After that, the Mack family comes out. The Mack family attorneys showed up into the courtroom for the first time this week, and those are the people. That's the attorney, civil rights attorney, and attorney for the Brent Mack family, and that was the first time that I had seen them since Dan Triplett's bond was revoked several months ago. But they came into the courtroom toward the end of J.R. Cockla's closing arguments. Mack's family then exits the courtroom into the hallway. All the media, all 4 Oklahoma City television stations were there. Of course, I was there. There was a bunch of people surrounded there, and they gave their deal. And if you want to watch that video, that is on Guthrie News page, YouTube. Also on GuthrieNewsPage.com. It's all on Guthrie News page. Of course, this is Second Banana Media. This is my opinion on some of the stuff, so that's why this is my podcast. This is separate from the news because I don't want my thoughts and all that stuff into the news, because that is news page. My personal opinion should not be in the news page, so that's why this is on Second Banana Media, and so that's what there. Okay, a few other things here. I thought I'm a little biased here, but I have a really good friend, Seth Robbins, and I think he summed this up very well. If a lot of people are on Facebook. A lot of people have seen this, but a lot of people are not on Facebook. And I thought he did a great job of summarizing this up. As a total unrelated party to both halves of this horrendous event, there is no joy or sorrow for me, just victims left in the wake of this act. Survivors of the deceased and of the perpetrator will never be the same, and that's truly sad. However, a timely trial in front of a jury of your peers is one of the backbones of our country, and I'm appreciative of the judge, jury, the state, and defense counsel. I'm glad I was none of those, but proud of them all the same, and of our system of government and justice in this country. I know it's not always perfect, but I bet they get it right way more times than not. Prayers for all the victims in this situation, especially the immediate and extended Mack family members. God bless. Just a great comment there by Seth Robbins. And I thought it was great. Brent Mack's son, afterwards, you can watch it on the video if you like, said this has nothing to do with Dan Triplett's daughters, has nothing to do with Dan Triplett's granddaughters, nothing to do with Dan Triplett's wife. They did not have anything to do with this. They were thrown into this just like the Mack family was. And so I thought that was great that the son of Brent Mack brought that up, because it is really hard for those family members on both sides to go through that. So I thought that was really, really good. Okay, I see a lot of great here. I'm looking for cues because it makes it easier for me here. Here's Randy at the very top. Randy says, has anyone ever asked the owner of the property the septic tank was at how he felt about all this? It only allows 140 characters on this, so let me go. Has anyone ever asked the owner of the property the septic tank was at how he felt about all this? I mean, does he want to move to get the totally redone, anything like that? Randy, no. When they left the courtroom, the court was still going on, and I didn't want to miss anything in the courtroom, but you can tell those 2 siblings didn't want to be there, and I bet they were just wanting to be done. But no, I did not ask that, just because I didn't want to leave the courtroom and maybe miss anything, because that one day was just a witness after witness after witness. All right, I'm at 45 minutes, so if we want to go another 15, that's great. If there's questions, make sure I got all my list on here. Oh, someone asked me if, I almost forgot, someone asked me if me watching the video, if I could tell if someone jumped into the hole, like Dan Triplett said it happened, or if someone had fallen into the hole. For me, looking at it, it looked like Dan Triplett fell in the hole, like fell. Because I was, thinking about this late at night, during the day. This trial has been talked about a whole much. So I was thinking, if you jump in the hole, usually kind of go up, to kind of get ready to go up. I guess you don't have to, but I think you go up to jump just a little bit. And I didn't see that. It was just like he had just fallen over is what it looked like to me. And I watched it 3 times, and that's the way it looked to me. I never saw him kind of jump. It was just kind of a fall over. So someone had asked me that. That's my opinion on there. Great police work. I mentioned a little bit earlier, but the police did a great job of talking to him. They realized he wasn't telling the truth. They did 3 different warrants on stuff. Mark Bruning, we all know who passed. I think he won his final case here today, and he gave Dan Triplett every opportunity to do self-defense. So, Mark Bruning on October 12th, they had that interview, and Mark Bruning, hey, if it was self-defense, tell me, I get it. He said that twice to him. And so your mind wonders that, is Dan Triplett thinking about that? Is he thinking about that in jail? And then Dan Triplett sees the video and sees that you can't see inside the camp. You can't see inside the hole, and there's a big dirt over here. So does Dan Triplett think of this great story that it was self-defense? Mark Bruning was onto something. It was self-defense. I went in the hole, and all the action happened in front of the dirt, so you can't see anything. Was that part of it? When did Dan Triplett come up with this story? So that's the kind of things that process in my head. I'm sure everybody has thought of different things of how this played out, but whether I'm right or wrong, the jurors did not believe Dan Triplett on the stand. And I told you last week, when Dan Triplett took the stand, and everyone was like, "Oh wow, he's taking the stand." A defendant never takes the stand. They were intent. I mean, they were leaning forward, paying attention the first several minutes of his testimony. But as he kept going and going, you can see the jurors get a little bit more relaxed. You can tell their body language that they did not believe him. And when you deliberate for 2 hours and 13 minutes with lunch, that tells you their body language was exactly what their deliberations came out with. That hangry mama, I saw her on TikTok. Getting all those big views. That a girl. Question, what are the odds the state would try to get back taxes on all the years he paid his employee cash? I don't know if they even thought about that. I'm sure it's a question. I'm sure that's something they can look at, but I'm sure that was way behind their back because they had so much in front of them with this trial. But they could. They absolutely could. They're going to have to go through a lot of documents spread throughout the house and wherever that might be. So could be. Kylie says this, and I go back and forth on this one here. It cuts off. So Kylie says, I also believe the family of Dan Triplett, his wife and daughters are victims in this well. Prayers for them as well as their lives. Okay, I thought she was going somewhere that, yes, absolutely, totally agree. And so if you're the daughters or the wife, you want to believe your husband or your dad. I'm sure there's doubt and all that stuff. You want to believe. It's hard. It'd be tough to be in their situation to hear all the testimony, all going on. But yeah, they are. I'm sure they're going through a lot of emotion, knowing that their dad will not be out ever again. Randy asked, now that it's all been said and done, how do you feel about all this, Chris? Was justice done in your opinion? Yes, Randy, remember at the very beginning of this, I think it was in the pre-trial that I obviously have my opinions. I've heard stuff. There's a lot of stuff that I have also heard that I think is true that did not come into evidence. There was witnesses that weren't called that I thought was going to bring more of a motive type deal, but obviously the state didn't need to have strong motive because it's not one of the elements. But with all the background information that I think I've listened over, I thought he was guilty going into it. But as I said, I'm also one that if I'm going to put somebody in prison for the rest of their life, you're going to have to convince me. What I think and what I might know is different from letting me know. And so with all the evidence in this courtroom, just like the jurors, I thought they made the right decision. So I thought justice was done, whether it was in for life or without parole. That didn't matter. It's not going to play a factor in his sentence on there. So it wasn't going to play a factor. So that's my humble opinion on that deal. So again, I always my friends always get on to me because I always ride the fence because, well, this could happen. So, but thank you for the question. It is my podcast, and that's why this is part of Second Man Media, Chris Evans' podcast, and not on Guthrie News Page, because it wouldn't look good if I go on Guthrie News Page and start giving you my opinion when that job is to produce the news and whether it's for both sides and try to get out of the way. Yes, Jordan said Luke Young made a really nice post about Mark Bruning. He did. Mark Bruning's sister was in the courtroom. I think maybe for 4 of the 5 days. I don't think she was there for jury selection, but she was there to honor her brother, and she was there to hear his voice again. But yeah, she was there and was there for the entire time to honor his memory. Kylie, once again, the Mack family represented themselves well. They were direct and even kind in their statements. God bless their hearts. Yeah, they were extremely kind. They were tremendous throughout the entire process. They were a little upset a while back when Judge Worthington gave Dan Triplett bond, which I thought was a mistake. I don't know what went into that process. It's been hatched over and over, but ultimately, he violated that, not parole, but I'm losing the word right now, bond. The bond by going to other places, and they were upset about that. And the civil rights attorney was down here talking about that, and it was really a big deal, rightfully so. I don't think that was right, but went back in, and then. Obviously, will not get out again. Kylie says, play stupid games, win stupid prizes. That's one of the comments today made by Troy Franklin Smith, the family member of Brent Mack. All right, so we got just a few minutes here left if anybody wants any further questions. So hopefully I was able to wrap it up. I appreciate everybody checking this out. And again, there's been a lot of testimony. I tried to write down as much as I could. And a lot of times it was back and forth. It was probably confusing, but I appreciate everyone doing that. And, I'm not perfect. I've seen a lot of trials, and obviously I'm not perfect in my words. I stammer, I guess, at time because I'm trying to read and not waste your time. Sometimes, I've had a few people come after me, but you guys were positive, and I get that. I'm not perfect by any means, and there's some things that I will continue to work on. But you guys had my back, and I didn't have to say anything on some comments of some people coming after me. But that happens when you put yourself out like that. It does happen, and I got some good friends out there, and I appreciate everybody sticking up for me last week. But I didn't take it personal. It's just part of the deal. But I won't bore you about that with me. Okay, we got a question here by Tristan, and we can go probably about 5 more minutes here. Do you think he could have done something like this before, according to how he tried to get away with it? Thank you for that question, Tristan. That has come up. People said, well, how many other people have Dan Triplett killed and buried? And I don't think any of that. I don't think any. There's, and what makes me say that is there's no missing persons that police are searching that would be involved with him. So, there's not this missing persons or persons that would be related in this case. So I don't think there's been very many. I don't think there's anybody else that Dan Triplett has killed or murdered. I mean, just my opinion. Never know. But I don't think so. The Hangry Mama, someone called me the worst storyteller. I'm not a good storyteller. I've kind of learned on the fly, but yeah. Kylie, thank you. Appreciate that. Round of applause, great coverage. Thank you. So I guess the next thing, as we wrap it up here, June 16th will be the formal hearing for Dan Triplett at 9 a.m. And I'm scheduled to be out of town, so I will have to find some junior reporters or somebody to be in the courtroom for me on that day. So, but that's in June. Formal sentencing again. What the next step is, that formal sentencing. What I will be interested in that sentencing, Judge Corley is going to honor the juror and give Dan Triplett life without parole, even if it is without parole. Excuse me. Even if it is with parole, it doesn't matter. My thing coming out here that I'll be paying attention for on June 16th is if Dan Triplett speaks, and how does he speak? Does he apologize? Does he remain innocent? That's what I want to hear. Dan Triplett, no matter what he says or does, will go to prison for the rest of his life. Does he come clean? Does he presume innocence? All that, I don't know. But Dan Triplett, as of a little after 2 o'clock today, is a convicted murderer. Got a couple of volunteers. All right. I will seek job application. No, I won't seek job application. So, yes, Randy, that's it. That's a question I get all the time. Agree. You could use some help. You can't be everywhere at once. Couple of things. People who work hard probably want to get paid. So I'm horrible at advertising. I don't like doing advertising. That's the one thing, but I would love to grow. There's some great things about being the only person with Guthrie News page, although I get a lot of help, tons of help behind the scenes. And I'm not saying it's just a one-man show by any means, but there are times I wish there was 4 or 5 of me to help with that, and it'd probably be good. But maybe one day, maybe something big will happen and we can get a good old, Stevie says, send little Ronnie. That would make me a little nervous. That would make me love her. No, he would do a good job, but we will get it covered. I promise you, I will have a plan. I will be out of town, but I promise you, I will have a plan to make sure that is covered the way hopefully I'm covering it this past week. If probably someone might even do it a little bit better. So, all right, I am out of here. I hope everyone has a great Wednesday. The rain continues to come. I think there's more tomorrow, because the lakes and rivers and ponds here in Guthrie and Logan County and Oklahoma are looking horrible. So hopefully we get that. So again, a big thank you to everybody. All the questions were tremendous. And again, I can't thank you guys enough for helping me out on this podcast, because you guys asked some great questions. So prayers to the Mack family, prayers to the Triplett family. And I hope everyone has a great night. So long.